Hey everyone, that's Slime here with a Brawl deck explainer. The commander I'm featuring today is Wrenn Six. Enjoy! Wrenn Six is a legendary Gruul planeswalker that comes in with 3 loyalty. He can be your commander in Brawl. The modes are +1, return up to 1 target land from your graveyard to your hand, -1, Wrenn Six deals 1 damage to any target, and his ultimate, -7, says, you get an emblem with instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard have Retrace. Retrace is a mechanic in Magic that utilizes land cards in your hand to allow you to replay cards from your graveyard. In Wrenn Six's case, because it specifically mentions instant and sorceries, he allows you to recast instant and sorceries from your graveyard simply by discarding a land, and compared to Flashback, does not have the downside of the card getting exiled from your graveyard when cast. So what this means is basically if you're able to have lands in your hand at all times, you can recast any instant sorcery cards from your graveyard at will. Alright, so getting into the deck list here, I've organized things by column and category, and I'll go into that in a little bit. My original inspiration for the deck was to pair a Crucible type commander to a toolbox anti-meta, answering different kind of meta looks that the players will throw at you, and this is what I've come up with. So we essentially only had one commander, unfortunately. Thankfully, Wrenn Six is legal to us. As a mana-efficient Crucible commander, he's fantastic for that. He has a +1 return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. That's the thing we're abusing most often. Sometimes we're maxing on the ping against like Rofellos and 1 toughness commanders, which are few and far between, but a lot of people play Rofellos, so it's very strong against that. But yeah, so anyways, the categories that we have set up here, I have direct damage, sweepers, value engines, tutors, tech, specific tech pieces, and then Emrakul is kind of just floating off to the side in his own category, and our lands. So I will say up front, the deck actually surprisingly works into Delirium pretty well. We run every typing, even something like the Invasion of Urgamon, which is actually, after we tested it, a fantastic battle. Really good card for our deck. Now, I won't go on and on about each individual card, but I will say a couple of things about key pieces in each category here. So notably, to start with, since we do work in a Delirium in the single target category, we have Unholy Heat, which notably was recently unnerfed. So it's back to the original version, which is much stronger than the nerf version. So this is a fantastic card. A lot of the time, you're going to be able to get the 6 damage out of that, no problem. We have Bone Crusher Giant, fantastic 2-in-1 board presence creature with strong wording on it and a single target. Very, very good card for our deck. We have Soul Seer. Soul Seer is basically in here. This could be over in the tech, but I put it in direct damage just because, well, it is a direct damage card, and we're using it basically for one reason, and that reason is Cotus. Our deck and our colors have a lot of trouble dealing with indestructibility, and so Soul Seer is basically the best answer for that. Typically, when you Soul Seer a Cotus, a lot of the time there's a scoop on the spot just because of the dynamics of the game and how strong that interaction is. And then we have Weathermaker. Weathermaker is just one of the best cards in our deck. I don't know how much more I can say about it, really. It's just a fantastic card, not to be underrated. It does so many things for our deck. You get value out of every single thing it does. It deals 3 damage to any target by removing 3 charge counters, which our deck can do extremely easy. You could put this into a couple of different categories here. I put it in single target, just because a lot of the time you're using it to deal with what's on the board. 3 damage is significant enough to kill most creatures, and then you can pair that with Wrenn to go up to 4, which is quite strong, plus it curves on 2 into 3 from our commander, so a lot of the time you're doing that. You're doing Wrenn on 2, Weathermaker on 3, and that's extremely strong. Then we have the sweepers over here. I'll just make note of the two standouts in this, which is Chandra and Starve Extinction. Chandra is an uncounterable sweeper that has other things that our deck really needs. It has a built-in win con if you need the emblem, which can't be interacted with, very strong. But a lot of the time you're using it for the sweeper or the large single target damage it gives you. The Brawl meta, as of early 2026, very, very much blue heavy. You'll run into a lot of counterspell tribal and just counterspells in general. So having the uncounterability on a card like this is just fantastic for our deck. Then we have Starve Extinction, which is basically the best card for what it does that we have access to. It's essentially the only card that's a Wrath of God that you can be sure is going to sweep the entire board, no questions asked. If a creature has toughness larger than 20, you have much bigger issues that Star's not going to be able to solve for you that you needed to solve earlier. So Star of Extinction, I was a bit hesitant to include it, but yeah, after testing with it out and with it in, it absolutely is an uncuttable in my opinion in this deck. Okay, so moving over to the value cards, there's 4 I will point out specifically that I wanted to make mention of. The first is Burgeoning. Burgeoning is typically, in my opinion, a very bad card for Brawl. I don't like it in most decks. The 2 decks that I think it is an uncuttable in that you should highly consider including are Wrenn Six and Slogger, mostly because of the fact that these 2 cards are very good at getting lands back into your hand that you would like to replay with an effect like Burgeoning. So the fact that Burgeoning gives that value to you in a very reliable way means to me that you almost always realize value from it that you wouldn't otherwise. And the fact that it doesn't stand on the same converted mana cost our commander is that you can play it on 1 and then Wrenn Six on 2 means you're probably going to get a tremendous amount of value out of this card reliably most of your games. The next card I wanted to make note of is Palantir of Orthanc. I don't know if much more needs to be said about Palantir of Orthanc at this point. I feel like most people are onto this card, but if you're not, strongly consider crafting and putting it in your deck. Palantir of Orthanc is an insanely powerful Magic the Gathering card. It's an colorless artifact, so you don't need to fix for it. It curves from our commander 2 into 3. It will win you a bunch of games because there's only 25 life in Brawl, so the amount of proxy opponents can actually realistically eat is the first one, so you can use that to your advantage. It scries for us, it seeds the top of your deck, it mills cards into our graveyard, which works in a Delirium. It's a win con on its own. It's fantastic in grindy games, which this deck is very much built to get into reliably. So for all of those reasons, Palantir is probably the strongest card in our deck. One of the strongest cards in Brawl. Just a fantastic card. You can't go wrong with it. Moving down, we have Icetill Explorer. Don't really need to say much about it. It's a Crucible and an Exploration in a good statted creature. Yeah, just put Icetill on your deck. You won't be disappointed by it. And then lastly, in the value section, I'll point out Walk-in Closet. So we played around a lot with Crucible of Worlds and Walk-in Closet, having the closet out, Crucible in, having both in, etc. My opinion is that Crucible Worlds is too redundant for this deck. It oftentimes just did nothing and sat in our hand, whereas Walk-in Closet, you get the Crucible effect out of it. The top end on it is essentially limitless, and then since you are creating so much mana, you're putting so many lands into play, the games typically go pretty long. So what ends up happening is you'll get to a point where you need to unlock the cellar and then overrun your opponent with value by using your graveyard, which you've loaded up with a bunch of other cards in our deck that are very good at that. This is the tutor section. I don't really think much needs to be said about this. All these cards are pretty self-explanatory. A lot of the things you're searching for are lands, so I'll go into that in more detail once we get to the land section. Here we have the text section, so I'll go down most of these individually just to explain, because almost every card in here is specifically set up to deal with a certain deck you will run into a lot, or an archetype that you run into very reliably in Brawl. And so starting with Veil of Summer up here, Veil of Summer is to deal with all of the blue mages in the Brawl queue, of which there are a significant number that you need to account for. So we have cards like Veil of Summer, Chandra in here, and Hexing Squelcher that you will need to make sure you recognize what commander they're playing before you accept your opening hand. Realize that you're probably playing a counterspell heavy blue commander, mulligan aggressively into one of these cards, be able to find them, and then play accordingly using the tools that you have available to you. So Hexing Squelcher and Veil of Summer are 2 of the best cards in our colors to be able to deal with these kinds of decks, and as such they're, in my opinion, uncuttables for those reasons. Ghost Vacuum is repeatable. It's a repeatable graveyard hate card that curves into our commander, so it fits very nicely in this deck compared to some of the other options like the Ooze or things like that. This is, in my opinion, like the cleanest thing to be able to answer the Cavero type, Reanimator, Stick Fingers, stuff like that if you do run into these decks. Now we have Sazakap's Brew. Sazakap's Brew looks like a weird card in this deck, and I assure you it's not. Sazakap's Brew, what it does for us is a lot of the time in most games, what it is just a 2-mana instant. Target player draws 2 cards. That player is going to be you. Sometimes you're going to run into these cheese decks that typically what it is either Brawl or Jace or some efficient blue commander that uses Thassa's Oracle, Treasure Hunt, 90 plus islands, and like the max amount of seek cards to seek all of their non-lands into their hand, and then Treasure Hunt. On one turn, they treasure hunt all of the lands in their hand, play Thassa's Oracle, and win on the spot. I looked through all of the cards in Brawl, and Sazakap's Brew was basically the only card that came up that could, on the stack, respond to that Thassa's trigger, point the draw at your opponent when they have no cards left in their deck, and kill them on the spot. So Sazakap's Brew is a fantastic card for that, and it does stuff for us otherwise most of the time when you don't face those decks. And then moving on down to Tybalt's Trickery, transitioning from Sazakap's Brew, Tybalt's Trickery is another answer to the cheese decks, but mainly the reason we have it in here is for dealing with Raph and Mikey, which is one of the strongest decks against our deck. We have a lot of trouble dealing with Raph and Mikey. They ramp into it super quickly. We have a hard time getting them to stop from casting it. And then when it resolves and they swing with it, that's essentially game on the spot. So we have no other option in our deck, basically, other than to pair up like a Weathermaker plus a Delirium Unholy Heat. So 2 cards to be able to deal with the one resolve before they swing. Tybalt's Trickery is the cleanest answer to be able to deal with that. And a lot of the time what ends up happening is when they play the Raph and Mikey and you Tybalt's Trickery, they're not gonna get any card off of the exile, exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They oftentimes get nothing, and then their commander gets countered, and that results typically in like a table flip scoop. They get kind of mad when that happens, so very nice card to include for a bunch of different reasons in the deck. Untimely Malfunction is just every mode on it is really value things we're looking for, so can't go wrong with Untimely Malfunction. Just a perfect toolbox card, basically. Back to Nature is specifically in here to deal with all the high-buy decks. There's a lot of them running around the Brawl queue. If people eventually get off of high-buy and they move off of the enchantment spam, you can pull this out of the deck. Another card that we swap in and out that's similar to Back to Nature is Karn, the Great Creator. Karn, we were putting in against Ugin decks, but I found a lot of people got off of Karn. So if people get back onto decks like Ugin that are artifact heavy, you can swap out Back to Nature, put it in Karn, so there's a lot of flexibility in that way. Shigeki is not necessarily like a specific tech, it's just more does a bunch of things we need it to. It fills up our graveyard, it gets cards back from our graveyard, so it double types into Delirium, just a fantastic card for us. And then, yeah, Blood Moon is Blood Moon. Don't think I need to spend too much time on that. And then we have Emrakul. Emrakul is just kind of floating over here because it's a Delirium bomb that we want something to be able to close the game out with by slamming it on the table, and Emrakul fits that perfectly. What I will say is because Emrakul is easily the juiciest bribery target for your deck, a lot of the time what we've ended up having to do is if we're facing a lot of those decks is put the Northampton Farm Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles land into this deck, which can exile it after it's been briberied, and then it basically, once you sack the farm, once it comes back to your turn, then you can just put it right into play. That's a very strong interaction if you take advantage of it. All right, and then we'll move over to the lands and spend a little bit of time explaining what we have going on here. We're running basically max fetches. We're close, but not every fetch is in the deck, but we have most of them. The best one, obviously, is Wooded Foothills. And then we have, we're maxed out mostly on Mountains for Valakut Win, which you can pair with Thespian Stage in long, grindy control games to be able to get repeated 3-mana damages to the opponent's face for a win. A lot of the time that will be good for a win, so you want to be aware of that. We have Beseiju to answer game-ending enchantments or artifacts that your opponents will sometimes throw at you, so you have to be aware of if they're going to be able to pull that against you. Go and scry for Beseiju, or go and search for Beseiju with something like Sylvan Scrying, Elvish Reclaimer, Crop Rotation, things like that, be able to answer it. And then we have Shifting Woodland. Since we're playing into Delirium, you can shift into Emrakul. There's all sorts of good things you can shift into in this deck. And so just a fantastic card for us. And then moving on down, we have Cabaret Courtyard is a repeated life gain that you can spam if you need to go up on life. Since Brawl, you don't have that much life to work with. You only have 25. Instead of the usual 40 you get from Commander, this actually ends up being quite value for us, along with going and finding all of the mountains we need to set up for a Valakut win. We have right underneath it Command Beacon, which is one of the best lands in our deck since you can go find it, and then if they're killing Wrenn Six over and over, you can sack it to put Wrenn Six from your command zone into your hand, bypassing the commander tax, replay it for 2, plus it, get the Command Beacon back, and then just loop that over and over again. Very strong 2-card interaction. Cryptic Cave is just a fantastic land that gasses up, that Wrenn Six can get back, that we can Crucible back in. Dark Depths goes with Thespian Stage for the Dark Depths combo, which will win you a significant number of your games. Quickly going into that, a lot of the time is the best play, so something to be aware of. And then we have Library of Alexandria, which is a new land that they added that benefits us greatly because obviously if you start turn 1 with Library, you're going to get a ton of value out of it, but even if you don't, you oftentimes end up having so many cards in your hand that you will be able to draw a card because you have 7 exactly. It's not that hard to do. So, fantastic land. And then another new land in Petrified Hamlet, which techs against a whole bunch of stuff. Rogue's Passage, unblockable lands, Basing Se. There's a lot of strong activated lands. Fetch lands, any fetch lands. There's a bunch of good stuff that you can name with this fantastic land for a deck. And yeah, so obvious include for it. And then we have Urza's Cave lastly, which is another tutor inside of a land. So going and finding this can set you up. If you think the game's going to be longer, a slower kind of game, you can go find Urza's Cave with like a Sylvan Scrying, and then start working yourself into all of your different win cons on your lands. So Urza's Cave is one of the best lands in our deck for those reasons as well. All right, that's the explainer for the deck. Hope that was helpful. Now let's get into the games. Okay, we have game 1 here. So we are against High Buy. We're going to need to aggressively try and work into Back to Nature. Now, this opening hand looks pretty decent. Don't have Back to Nature in the opening. Don't really have enchantment removal at all. So I am tempted to mull it. Opponent does go first. I think I can make this work. Let's keep it. Opponent's going to play Airbender Ascension to airbend the creature. That's a good play. That does slow us down because Fabled Passage is going to make it so that we can't get a second untapped land as quickly. Going to go find a mountain here. Typically, you want to go find mountains as your basic almost all of the time. We're pretty mountain heavy on pips, and obviously for Valakut's much more helpful to go find them early. Going to dump both lands down. Typically, you want to be discarding your lands to your looting effects like that. Since we're going to be playing Wrenn Six anyways, he's going to be able to go get them back to make sure we hit our land drops. Looks like opponent might be doing some counterspell shenanigans. A lot of the high buy decks nowadays are geared more into being counterspell interaction heavy. So we'll see what our opponent does here with that. Alright, High Buy's going to come out. Opponent's going to go get a Shrine. We'll see what he goes and gets. Sanctum of Calm Waters. Let's just get Wrenn Six down. We have Untimely Malfunction. We have to make sure we don't lose pace here. We are getting outvalued now. That Sanctum's going to be in, so we're going to have to try and find a... Back to Nature pretty quickly here. Opponent is going to dismember. We are going to use Untimely Malfunction to change the target to his High Buy. And opponent's going to play Resonating Loot. Sure. Okay. Our turn. Alright. So let's go get Cinderglade. I think here would be good. Keep plussing Wrenn Six. Oh, we can get back the Burden again. Just keep thing our deck of forests and mountains. Here, normally, I think I would like to play Faithless Looting on the flashback, so let's do that. Let's dump down the lands. Both those look good. High-Buy is a spirit, which he did name with that, so we can't counter it. Let's go ahead and Ghost Fac here. And I think get Shigeki in. Now, the thing to keep in mind with High-Buy is they generate such value that since we don't pose an immediate threat usually, unless you can work into the Dark Depths Thespian stage combo quickly. Typically that ends up not mattering because the High-Buy, they run enough tools nowadays to be able to deal with it pretty effectively. So just something you got to be aware of, that the High-Buy decks, they're very good at outvaluing you, so having the ability to back to nature their board essentially is, it's effectively a reset. It's not going to like win you the game on the spot necessarily unless they scoop, so. He doesn't have a land I can name with that, which makes me want to just plus Wrenn, play the land that he gets me. So what we can do here is, I'm going to get Thespian, I'm going to play it, and then we can Ghost Quarter the Cavern of Souls. Get rid of that, and then when he tries to play High-Buy, I can Tibalt him, and we'll see how he responds to that. Okay. Take the creature out in case we need that. And then let's activate Shigeki. Cabaretti, perfect. That was a good activation by Shigeki. We don't really need any other cards that he hit there, so that was perfect. Replay him. Pass turn. So now basically the opponent is set up where if High-Buy does resolve, he's going to be generating a shrine in play every turn with the Thassus, so ideally we don't allow him to do that. So we're pretty close to the Retrace being able to do that. We'll see what it hits off this. He did hit a very good shrine off of that, unfortunately, so he does get to play that for free. That does happen sometimes with Tibalts, unfortunately. We would rather have that than have High-Buy resolve because I have other ways to deal with that. He can't flicker anything. And then, yeah, so we're looking at just trying to get into back to nature as soon as we can. Let's name, what do we want to name here? I don't really know. I'm just going to go Rogue's Passage because I don't know what else to name, so let's do that. I don't really see him using any fetches, so he might not have it, so let's get a plus. We'll get Ghost Quarter back in. Let's see, what do we want to Ghost Fac here? Just anything seems fine. Perfect. Okay, so now we can Dark Depths into the combo. I don't know how he's going to deal with that. He's going to have to draw cards. And let's go Halfling plus Shigeki. And I think we're looking at just passing here. We'll see what kind of answers he can come up with. So he's going to draw 2 more, unfortunately. All right, and we get a scoop out of the opponent. So he sees that we have the Dark Depths combo, and we are setting up for a win there. All right, so game 2 here, we are against Murata. Murata can be a very tricky commander for us to deal with. Murata, the way to answer this basically is to try to efficiently get in direct damage on Murata to kill her before she stacks up too many counters on her. And if you do that enough times, it should be good enough for a win. So that being said, our opening hand, I think, is good enough. Back to Nature is basically a useless card for us, I think, this game. Typically not that great against artifact-centric decks, obviously. But we do have Bone Crusher Giant, which is one of our best cards in our deck for sneaking in some direct damage onto Murata, so I'm tempted to keep this. We do go first. I don't really want to mulligan. You can leverage your free mulligans in Brawl to help you out with your opening hands like this. After you recognize what their commander is, this deck especially, you need to be doing that. All that being said, I think we're still going to keep, though. So we'll crack the fetch. Go get something like Comdist. Seems fine. Get Surveil land down. Perfect. And so that's typically what you want to be doing, is try and just load your graveyard with lands so that you see non-lands more often. And our opponent is just going to play out his commanders. Kind of surprising. So in response, I will stomp it. Now, does he have Force of Negation? Does he have Force of Will? These are two very common cards you'll see in Brawl. He does not, so that goes through. Fantastic for us. Looking good so far. Next turn, we can Arboreal Grazer into Wrenn Six and get Dark Depths down, and then work into Cave for a quick Dark Depth combo, which blue typically has a hard time dealing with other than bouncing the token back. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that you are probably going to have that happen to you as the best answer for them to deal with it. Do we get an Arboreal? Okay, I think our opponent is considering countering that. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, the Dark Depths combo is particularly potent in this deck because the Dark Depths and the Stage both go to the bin, which our commander can get back into our hand, so you can keep repeating it. And then since blue is a bad color, typically to deal with like hard removal or exile or something like that, the best options they usually have available to them are either bouncing it with like an Into the Floodmaw or making it insignificant. I would say like an utter insignificance is probably the better way to go. It doesn't really matter though, because we can just recreate the token and then keep the new one. So gets around it pretty nicely. Okay, and our opponent's gonna scoop. Alright, getting into the next game here, we're against Quintorius. So Quintorius is a Boros-y kind of shell. They typically go for, you know, so it's like a combination between semi-aggro and Boros control. So that's what I'm expecting out of the opponent. Not really a deck you see. It's a newer commander that people are jamming just because the set came out recently, I think. But we'll see it. We'll see how we fare against it. Now this opening hand looks decent. It's I would call this a trap though, because we have no way to make the second colored mana, so we're gonna mull. And this hand is perfectly fine, so we're gonna keep that. We do go first, thankfully. We can get Wrenn Six out on 2. And it's one of the reasons why I really like playing this deck, because Wrenn Six is a 2-mana commander that looks pretty harmless on the face of it. So a lot of the time he will resolve, and then you can essentially slowly squeeze value out of the game that your opponent doesn't see a lot of the time. We'll see if he gets countered here with like a Mana Tithe or something. Yep. Okay, that's fine. Pull him back. So we have good tools. We have good tools to deal with aggro. We match up pretty well against it. We have a bunch of board wipes, very good board wipes. We have single target damage, all sorts of things, so. Alright, we will just abrade that. Totally fine with doing that. Okay, so opponent is trying to get the mana to be able to play Quintorius, it looks like. Nope, he's going to try and get a Johnny out. Okay, really thankful we have Slagstorm in our hand for this. Let's go Command Beacon. Let's put Wrenn Six into our hand. Start with that, and then Slagstorm. See how the opponent responds to that. Johnny goes down. Very good. So our opponent is in white. White is somewhat of a problematic. It can be problematic for our deck just because of the Dark Depths combo. So you got to be aware of that. But yeah, a lot of the time just make him have it because there's only like a small handful of cards that he could have that deal with the Dark Depths token. Okay, so we can we have a pretty strong sequence here, so we can go Wrenn Six ping into Mind Collapse. Now, the problem is if he can pump the Guide of Souls at all, that creates a problem for us. Where Wrenn Six is going to be too expensive for us to recast because we can't easily get the command beacon back into our hand. So I'm going to Sylvan Scry here for another land, probably just Urza's Cave. He doesn't have enough to escape Flagon, which is going to be a big problem for our deck, so we may end up just losing off of that. We'll see how quickly I can get into the Dark Depths combo. I have a feeling that Flagon is coming out here. I can't cast it because he got pipped on the the Cavern of Souls, so I think he might have just tapped himself to death there. They could just Lightning Helix it anyways. Okay, so it didn't matter. Alright. So yeah, when you avoid the commander tax with Command Beacon, it puts it in your hand and wipes out whatever the commander tax it had was. So then when you replay it, and if it gets killed again, like what just happened, it goes into your command zone on the first commander tax it would have. So since he's 2, then it goes up to 4, etc. That's why this Command Beacon loop is so strong, is because you can effectively wipe out the commander tax by doing that.
Time to dig.
Surprised he's not attacking Wrenn Six. Yeah, this is what I would have expected him to be doing. So he is at 24. That is, the reason that's important is because that takes 2 swings from the token instead of 1. So I think let's get a fetch back, thin the deck. Then we can cave. Puts a land on the battlefield tapped. Usually if you don't have either of the pieces of the combo, you want to go Thespian first. And then Dark Depths. Since the Dark Depths can just be tapped when you Thespian. So you want to untap with the Thespian, find the Dark Depths, put it into play, and then activate, and then you're good to go. But yeah, I think we're in a lot of trouble this game. Looks like we're getting outvalued here. Which tends to happen in these kinds of matchups because our deck does not really have board presence. We're not putting a lot of pressure on our opponent on the board. So that's why the Dark Depths combo is so important, because that's your immediate threat that the opponent has to deal with while you can do other stuff on the side, right? Opponent's thinking about how he wants to distribute damage. Puts it on Wrenn Six. It's very smart. That's what I would recommend doing.
It's the find of a lifetime.
Yep, swing on Wrenn Six. And so now we're looking at needing something like Star of Extinction, or just hoping basically that he doesn't have a perfect answer for the Merit Lodge token, if we can even get to that. We'll see. I can tutor for Ice Till or something like that here, which would probably be really helpful. But so let's see how much we are deliriumed up here. We have instant sorcery, land. So 3, which means it's going to be 10. We're not even close. So I think what that means is we need to get Vibrance, since it can 2-for-1 us on finding the Dark Depths, and then it creates a blocker. It's not a strong blocker, but it's better than nothing. We don't have 2 basics, so I have to go get a regular mountain here. We have double green. I don't have triple green, so I can't Veil on top of this in case he has another counter, but I guess it would just be a Reprieve, which it is. I think we probably just lose off of that, if I had to guess. We'll see. We'll see, because I can delay a turn with 1 ring, so... Looking pretty bad, though. We're going to need Star or something similar.
Must dig deeper.
Okay, opponent chooses to Sundering Eruption. Very good play. Slows down the Dark Tips combo. So the opponent is on top of it. He knows what the dynamics of the game are requiring of him. He's doing everything accordingly. So that's typically not a great look when you're behind on value and your opponent knows exactly what they're supposed to do and they do it. Very hard to win games like that. And so the opponent gets us down to 2. I think that's probably going to do it. We can 1 ring, see what he does. But I can't really do much out of the 1 ring, so I think we're just looking to Chain Lightning his commander, pass, hope we draw something. I don't know if we have any outs. Pretty sure we don't. I can't play Star if it comes off the top. I think that means we probably just scoop, so yeah. Good game by the opponent. They played well. And on to the next one. Okay, we're into the next game here, and we're facing a commander I don't really see a lot in the Brawl queue. Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. So Wrath is a 2-mana 1/3 human wizard. Azorius. Whenever you cast instant sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. It also has an activated ability, which I don't think the opponent's really going to be doing. So if I had to guess, the opponent is probably Counterspell Tribal. We'll find out. Normally, I would mulligan here when I recognize that to try and go get a Hexing Squelcher, but we have Library in the opening hand, which I think is probably going to be too much value since we go second, so we're going to keep that. Oh man, we have a ton of good stuff we could do here. I really want to grab Emrakul, but I think it's actually Delighted Halfling. So let's take that. Flame Slash the Mother. That's very annoying for us to try and get rid of, so let's do it now. And then I could play Wrenn Six, plus it, and then do the Library after. I wanted to do Library turn 1. I think it's probably a little too greedy. It looks like my opponent's working through his deck pretty quickly here, so we could play Wrenn Six. We could also just kill it. I think I'm more in favor of killing it with something like Molten Impact. Molten Impact I didn't really explain in the pre-game deck explainer part, but very, very good value since you get overkill. It's basically like an overkill boon, I guess it's called. And so when you play your next murder, then it applies the damage on that boon too. Very strong card. So it deals the noted number. So the noted number is 1, which is important because then we can use that with Slagstorm to kill the Ledger Shredder. This is one of the reasons why Molten Impact is so powerful, is a lot of the time you can add up all of this damage to effectively clear the board when they get to a number like 4, which a lot of the time can be hard for it to deal with. It's a very clean answer in that way. And yeah, we kind of just have perfect magic cards for our opponent here. I'm not getting any value out of Library, but that's a trade-off that you kind of have to consider as you're playing the game, you know? It's not always clear what exactly you should do, but so here we are going to plus Wrenn. I'm going to get the fetch back. And then we're going to get a forest, so I can play the halfling for a blocker. Could have also cycled if we wanted to. This dissuades the attack, I think, pretty well. So we'll just block here. In case there's some shenanigans. Looks like there are shenanigans, so he has Razor Grass. Good card. Doesn't deal damage, though. And he passes it back to us. Okay, perfect. So, let's do this. Let's go... I think let's start with a plus. Like that. And I smell a counterspell coming in here, so... We have 6 in our hand right now. Play library, draw a card, land. We could just pass. I could abrade. Could do a lot of things here. I think let's go library. I think I want a library and pass, I'm pretty sure. Wait for him to do something. We're kind of just chilling right now. Okay. So Malcolm is an important card for us to kill. It can hit Wrenn Six. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to abrade. I'm going to abrade Raph here, and then Malcolm is basically just left out on his own for me to be able to ping. So he has to effectively deal with Wrenn Six right now, or I can just kill it my next turn. Choosing not to cycle because I'm quite certain I can get enough cards in my hand to be able to get some value at a library here. So let's try and do that. Not going to play Zurin Orb. So how do we want to do it? We could play 2 lands. I think I probably want to do that and just skip trying to it's a little bit memey, I think, now to try and get the value of the library, so we might as well start slamming lands on the table and getting ahead on mana that way. Then we can cycle the thicket if we need to. Untimely I'm saving in case of needing to redirect something, basically, at this point. Sure. Gonna consult. Gets 2 cards in his hand. Very good. He's gonna go to 4. 4 cards in hand. May try to go land commander, it looks like. Not really too sure what the guy's deck is. He hasn't really done any counterspell stuff. It just looks like a Azorius aggro mid-range or something. Go get another mountain. Orms. It might have Orms chant. Is it Get Lost? I don't care about Get Lost for the simple fact that we have the command beacon loop, so I don't know if the opponent sees that or not, or if he thinks I might not see it, something like that, but we'll just sack it, get Wrenn Six back in our hand, recast him, get the command beacon back in our hand, and then show him that loop. Some people do scoop on the spot when that happens just because they see the value of it, but counterspell on it, that's fine. Totally fine. So that came from our hand, so we can just recast it again, do the exact same thing. I have not played a land yet for turn, so we can just play Command Beacon here if we want, which I'm going to do. Pass turn. And then, yeah, so if the opponent taps out and plays Raph, we can go Bone Crusher plus a ping to add up the damage to kill him, potentially. I think that'll probably result in the scoop. We've had fairly perfect magic cards to deal with the board presence, and it doesn't look like he's got unlimited gas to be able to recover from that. So this is what I mean by the deck is built for the long games, where you can grind your opponent into a longer type game, and generally, because we have so many value engines and gas and things like that in the deck, you end up outvaluing them in a pretty significant way. Okay, and that's going to be game. All right. All right, we're against Raphaelis. Let's get into the final game. So we're a go second versus Raphaelis. You really want to make sure that you guarantee Wrenn comes out on 2 right away. This hand to me is not playable. We can maybe get to a place where we can get Wrenn on 2 with a draw into a Gamba. I think that's way too narrow of a line to try and hit an untapped red source. Gamba, get an untapped green source, have it not be discarded, so we're just going to mull. And this hand is really good, actually, so we'll keep that. So we have a fetch. We have exploration with a fetch with a crucible, which is basically as good as it gets, and we can get the exploration out on turn 1. So we're going to crack the fetch and then go get... probably just another mountain would be good. Comes in tapped. Then we can Wrenn. We can go land, Wrenn, land. Actually, he's probably going to play Raphaelis on too. Oh, he didn't do it. Okay. So, yeah. So let's go... My opponent's in huge trouble here. It's quite a good opening for me. So let's get a forest. Get Wrenn. Pull back the Fabled so we stop taking damage from that fetch. And we can go back to the Misty if we need to. Get another mountain. Can't stress enough how much you want to be prioritizing mountains. You only need a couple of green pips at most. And the mountains are going to get you set up for Valakut, which comes up a lot. Something to be aware of. Okay. Pull land back. Play 2 lands. Play Chandra. I think we're just too far ahead. Opponent's gonna scoop. Alright, so that wraps up the games. Gonna give you some closing thoughts. If you like a Gruul, anti-meta, toolboxy, landlordy type deck, I think you'll really enjoy this deck. Wrenn Six is quite a fun commander. I've been enjoying it quite a lot. The deck has a lot to offer in terms of variety, things you need to be thinking about. Games are not necessarily straightforward. If you like that kind of thing, if you like solving individual games like they're a puzzle, this is a very good deck for that sort of thing. It matches up very well as of early 2026 here in the Brawl meta. I'm quite confident in it. The games, it performed really well today. Really happy with how the deck looked. It has some weak points to it, but they can be worked around. That's one of the strengths, I think, of the deck is there are so many different lines you can take with it to try and answer situations as they come up. But yeah, all that being said, hope you're liking the content. Appreciate any feedback. Trying to get uploads more regularly on YouTube here. We're going to call it there, though, for the day. If you like what I do, feel free to give me a follow on any of my socials. We're over on Moxfield. I'll have the deck list posted, the link for it, down in the description, which you can go check out the deck. We keep that fairly up to date. And then, yeah, if you want to show extra support, consider dropping a follow over on Twitch. Give me a shout, say hi, get some feedback, your thoughts. If you want to stop in there, I stream live most days, Monday through Saturday, 6 days a week. Or down in the YouTube comments, you want to give me a subscribe on YouTube. The channel's fairly new, so I'd really appreciate that. But, yeah, otherwise, good luck in your games, everybody, and we'll catch you in the next video.